Asian Americans are now standing with the blacks. News like this will definitely not make it to the mainstream, but honestly, a lot is happening that you are not aware of. I'd like you to watch this video and see them actually thank Black Americans for standing by them, for helping them. When people are not seeing what Black Americans are doing, a lot of people are actually noticing it. And Asian Americans have formed a very strong bond with Black Americans. They're standing in solidarity with each other. In fact, you have to watch these videos. They are so beautiful to watch. And I'll be back with the commentaries.
African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country.
But we know.
We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone and to make things fair.
We know.
But the problem is our communities are divided. They're completely
Why?
divided. And I talk about this all the time, is that like for Asian Americans and for African Americans, we probably have one of the worst relationships between any community.
Well, I bet you a lot of Asian Americans too don't, in my experience, don't even realize that if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, if it wasn't for that,
Yes.
there would not be 22 million Asian Americans in this
Thank
country.
you.
Hello.
Thank you.
So-
And what I have been trying to teach the Asian community is like, friends, do you understand that your success, your prosperity, your civil rights that you enjoy right now was paid for with Black blood?
Yes.
The thing is that we know. We've always known. And we sang it from the rooftops. But people just don't want to listen because they want to be the model minority, especially the Asians. I've seen multiple videos of Asians saying that they were taught that they needed to align themselves with whiteness, uphold white supremacy, so that they could be the model minority and get more benefits and have a easier, successful life when they migrate here. All of the other immigrants, I don't even know what they think. I don't know. But it seems like everybody generally, they're told to avoid us. They're told that we're bad. They believe the negative stereotypes and the negative propaganda that they see when they're back home praying and dying and wishing to come over to America. They see these negative images of us. They see us on TV fighting, and they're only shown negativity. So it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter how many of us that they meet that's successful, literal millionaires, 100,000aires, business owners, holding multiple degrees, rearing children successfully, living in beautiful neighborhoods. It doesn't matter. They still want to compete with us because they want to be better. They feel like we're ungrateful and we don't deserve what we have. And an immigrant told me this earlier on a panel. And ultimately, it seems like they just don't like us. Now, not every single individual person from these communities have or share these same sentiments, but enough do, to whereas it's like the collective. So we know this. We know. But do they know? And maybe they'll hear it and receive it better coming from someone that looks more like them. Spread love is the Brooklyn way.
I've gotten a lot of really supportive messages on the one video I made with anti-Blackness in anime, but I also did get a disappointing number of people who chose to overlook what I was saying to instead say, like, why do you even care? Like, you're Asian. Why do you care if, like, about racism toward Black people? Like, and I think you shouldn't have to be personally invested to care. As a kid, I didn't really learn about anti-Blackness at all. And it was only when I got older and I was looking into my own history as Asian Americans that I realized how much we gained from the African American civil rights movements. Our first leaders in the Asian American civil rights movement were heavily inspired by the Black Panthers. In fact, some of them were even members of the Black Panthers. This man here is Richard Aoki. He was one of 3 Japanese Americans who joined the Black Panthers. Especially in the 1960s and 70s, there were many Japanese Americans involved in civil rights activism, like Richard Aoki I just mentioned, Yuri Kochiyama, Mike Tagawa, I believe, and part of that was from their experiences of internment. Even today, Japanese Americans remain one of the most progressive ethnicities of Asians in America. And I do want to reemphasize that you shouldn't have to get personal benefits from something in order to empathize with that cause, but I want to just really drive home how much Asian Americans have benefited from Black Americans. For instance, it might be hard to read this, but Langston Hughes is here speaking and criticizing the use of the atomic bomb. He basically believes that it would not be used against white countries. Now, obviously, the atomic bomb has not been used again since it was dropped on Nagasaki, but he had valid reasons to fear that. I mean, General Douglas MacArthur was very much of the mind that we should just nuke Korea off the map, and that would solve the communist fear during the Korean War. And Martin Luther King, in his 1967 address, I believe, in this address he spoke to recognize the horrors and the tragedies that Vietnamese people had to face during the Vietnam War. Malcolm X, friends with Yuri Kochiyama, was also an advocate against the use of nuclear weapons in Cold War Asia. I'm not trying to say this in order to diminish any racism that and prejudices that the Asian American and African American community have had against each other throughout centuries. But what I am saying is that we ultimately have a common struggle and cause against white imperialism, and that trying to constantly blame one side or the other and buy into white supremacist ideas is harmful to everyone. This page is from the Nadia Kim's book Imperial Subjects, and she speaks about how even Korean soldiers and civilians noticed the difference in treatment that white soldiers and black soldiers received. And additionally, they showed that they felt a little more companionship and fraternity with black Americans than with white Americans based on similar experiences of oppression. And some people are going to accuse me of cherry picking, and I do agree. I am picking out examples that support my idea that black people and Asians can be allies for each other. There's been plenty of examples of crimes against both sides by either party, but I don't think that that ultimately should be what we allow to characterize our community's relationships with each other. And especially as an Asian American, I've firsthand benefited from a lot of Black movements. I mean, when I was a child, I grew up in a predominantly white space, and I would be a little distant from other children of color because I was worried about becoming a bigger target for harassment and racism that I faced a lot. And as I got older, I went to a high school that was 51% Black. It was very diverse. And that's where I first learned to really love and accept myself. And it was because oftentimes owed to these friendships I'd formed with Black women. And as somebody who is dating a Black woman, I feel like it's my duty. Like I've been her friend for years before we were dating. And I think I do need to learn more about my partner's community in order to be a better um, support for them. And I think that too many of us don't really consume content outside of our specific niches, or we only want to learn about things that we find directly applicable to ourselves. But at the end of the day, we're all connected, and I think learning about each other can really never be a bad thing. Because I am only human, there are some subjects that I generally won't make videos about just because I've received um, a lot of hateful comments in the past for trying to bring that to light. But I do want to still try to encourage education and discourse. So I think in the next video, I'm going to make about why there's a lot of Asian-owned businesses in Black neighborhoods and other histories that I think are applicable to our daily lives. But I do apologize if I don't address something that might people might want me to, just because in the past I have had to private videos because it was taking a toll on my mental health.
As an Asian American, I'm often asked why do I focus so much on the advocacy work of Black Americans, and it is because their advocacy work is always inclusive. The Black Civil Rights Movement did not just benefit Black people, it benefited all marginalized people, and it is the reason why I, as an Asian American, have civil rights. Also, throughout Asian American history, Black Americans have consistently held space for including us in their advocacy work. From the increase in anti-Asian violence in 2020 and 2021, to looking out for Japanese Americans during World War II. Going all the way back to 1869 when Frederick Douglass delivered a speech arguing that Chinese should be allowed to immigrate and become citizens. He didn't only want to advocate for the United States becoming a home for Black and brown people, he said, "I want the Asiatic to find a home here in the United States, and feel at home here, both for his sake and for ours. Right wrongs, no man." The voice of civilization speaks an unmistakable language against the isolation of families, nations, and races, and pleads for composite nationality as essential to her triumphs. Man is man the world over. This fact is affirmed and admitted in any effort to deny it. The sentiments we exhibit, whether love or hate, confidence or fear, respect or contempt, will always imply a like humanity. If our action shall be in accordance with the principles of justice, liberty, and perfect human equality, no eloquence can adequately portray the greatness and grandeur of the future.
My granduncle, who was nicknamed Uncle Abin, was actually named Abraham Lincoln because my great-granduncle was raised in the United States and he respected President Lincoln, whom he had been taught abolished slavery. Of course, he didn't stay in the United States because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, but I have to wonder if he had known about Frederick Douglass's speech, would I instead have had an Uncle Fred? The reason why I, as an Asian American, focus so much on the advocacy work of Black Americans is because theirs is the work that I would like to model mine after.
I just wanted to come on here and speak to the Asian community. I'm like crying right now. I'm in my bonnet. Please do not mind me. I just wanted to say I have been seeing the news and seeing what's been going on right now in the Asian community. And I just want to say from the Black community as a Black woman that I love you guys and I support you in anything that you need right now. We actually understand each other more than I think that we've been taught to understand each other, and for the first time in a long time we're getting an opportunity to support each other, and you guys are getting an opportunity to use your voice, and I'm so happy for you. And I know it's hard to see it right now with everything that's going on, and you shouldn't be rushed, but I want you to know you're getting a chance to be free.
Why did I just get a good talking to from one of my Asian friends about how awesome Black people are? Now, while it might have been a little off-putting at the onset of the conversation, because my first thought was, where's this going? And what are you finna say? I gotta admit, he had a few good points. Let me tell you what they were. So the first thing he started telling me was that he felt like creativity and innovation was a big part of our DNA. The way we express ourselves and how we lead culture in so many different types of ways. He just realized that it all really translates back to our roots. Now I'm listening like, okay, tell me about our roots. He goes on to talk a little bit more about our values and how we care about each other as a whole community, which I was like, some communities, but go ahead. He went on to talk about how deep he felt like our values went and about how we show up for each other as a community, which I was like, oh my God, okay, like tell me more. He also talked a little bit about like a shared cultural respect and how we care about our elders and how many of us are very family oriented, which I thought was really cool. Because I know for me, I love my family. I don't play about my family. Mess with one of my cousin's kids, my mama, bitch. This all seemed to be especially important to him just because he felt like this was very similar to how he was raised and how his family is, which I thought was really interesting for him to share, but just also interesting to hear that there are parallels in other cultures, which I know there are, but I just was like, okay. He seemed to be very connected to Black people, which I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, I mean, we're awesome. I think we're great. I walked away from the situation feeling very seen, but also just like people outside of my people see my people. Not just for like the cultural aspects and some of the things we do well that like everybody gets to partake in, but just like who we are as a group of people that exist and take up space in the world. Like people be seeing us, okay. And I don't know, I think it's beautiful to know that other communities, people that don't look like us, appreciate us. Because I feel like the narrative always is just they don't like us. It's nice to know that other cultures like celebrate us and appreciate us in the space that we take up. I don't know about you guys, but I don't always spend a lot of time thinking about it. I just try to go out and be myself and exist in my truth and my reality of who I am. Especially in a world where like, folks everywhere are trying to erase our contributions. I definitely feel like I left that conversation thinking, maybe we are magic. Maybe we do shine so bright that they can't ignore us. Remember, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. And I think that's, for those people who want to erase contributions, that's probably their fear. Just saying, can't speak for it, I ain't afraid. I'd love to know what you guys think. Share in the comments below. Just wanted to share that, was interesting. Hope you guys are having a great day, but even if you're not, find some reason to smile today. Peace.
The K-pop music industry needs to show African Americans more love. Cause after seeing Big Hit's new group Cordis and their new song Go, it sounded eerily familiar to some Black artists I know like Travis Scott, Don Toliver. And now that I think of it, I feel like the whole K-pop music industry is influenced by Black culture and music. Hear me out, talented boys in a group who can sing and dance. Who does that remind you of? The Jackson 5. And look, it's not only Cordis that's taking inspiration from Black music. But most of these groups, anytime they have some sort of hip-hop rap section or like an R&B-ish feel, I feel like it's in direct correlation to African American music. I personally grew up with a lot of African Americans, especially within the music industry. And one of the main reasons I make R&B music today is because I was influenced by my Black vocal coach, Black musicians, and Black producers I worked with. I kid you not, one of the main reasons I learned to dance and sing is by watching Chris Brown and Michael Jackson. Anytime I saw those two guys on the stage and watched their performances, it would inspire me to become a better artist. But anyways, yeah, I think that the K-pop industry should show a little bit more appreciation towards African Americans. But in general, most music does take inspiration from other kinds of music, and I think we should all just enjoy it and have a great time together.
This and tell us what they be telling y'all at home that make y'all not like us so bad.
So you already know a lot of what my content covers, like racial triangulation, the model minority myth, Asian businesses in Black neighborhoods, affirmative action, and so on. As for what I was told in the home behind closed doors when I was growing up, that's not the most fun trip down memory lane, but I always like to be honest about acknowledging anti-Blackness among Asian Americans, especially when the call was coming from my own house, so here we go. I first became aware of my mom's anti-Blackness when I started kindergarten, and it mostly centered around avoiding interactions with Black people and not allowing me to be exposed to anything that she considered Black culture. So if we were walking and she saw a Black person, she would pull me closer to her. If we were in the car in a parking lot and saw a Black person in the parking lot, she would make a point to lock the doors, and I wasn't allowed to listen to rap or Michael Jackson or Tina Turner. And she was hypocritical about that, because I wasn't allowed to listen to Cyndi Lauper or Madonna either. She would call it trash music and say that it was going to be a bad influence. But if it was a white artist, it was not racialized. It was only when it was Black artists that it was racialized. And another thing that I think is kind of typical is, as a musician, there were a lot of Black artists whom she respected and enjoyed, but she would always say that one Black artist is the exception, the rest are bad influences. When I went to school, if I came home and said I made a friend, her first question would be white or Black. And that drove me nuts, because in preschool, I dealt with a lot of bullying and discrimination because of being Asian, so it didn't make sense to me that she wanted me to turn around and do that very same thing to my Black classmates, whom she knew nothing about, on the basis of their skin color. And when I wouldn't stay away from my Black friends, she would resort to making up justifications as to why it was harmful for me. She would say they're going to hurt me and they're going to be a bad influence because they fight and they swear and they're not good students. And of course, none of that was true. And in my household, it was not physically or emotionally safe to voice your opinions, but about that I would, because it literally angered me. And then she would resort to physical violence. And that sealed the deal in my mind that prejudice is purely irrational, because none of her claims had any basis in reality, and that's why she had to resort to physical force. Unfortunately, I think that when parents resort to intimidation and violence to instill prejudice in their children, a lot of times it works. But I was very lucky, because the principal of my elementary school was a Black woman who implemented a program called Students Educating Each Other About Discrimination. And that wasn't centered on racial discrimination, it was about discrimination in general. But in that program, we learned to have discussions about discrimination and to identify it and disrupt it. Which at that age just means if you witness discrimination, say it's discrimination and articulate how you know that it's discrimination. So from learning that very powerful tool at school, I was able to identify that what my mom was doing at home was wrong. Additionally, the principal was a Black woman, so I had a Black woman in a position of leadership as a role model. And in my school district, she wasn't a token. They really valued Black leadership, from teachers to administration, guidance counselors, all the way up to superintendents. And so I was surrounded by Black role models who made me see that reality did not line up with what my mom was trying to teach me. The straw that broke the camel's back was sometime around the ages of between 7 and 9. I was planning a birthday party, and I told my mom that I want to invite my friend Keisha, which I knew was going to be an issue, but I thought I would try. And she said no, and I said, fine, then I don't want to have a birthday party, and she made me have the birthday party. So now that felt like that's not only cruel to me, but that's cruel to my friend Keisha, whom you don't even know because you refused to meet her. Shortly after that, we were walking in the mall, and my mom did this thing that she often did, which is she sees Black people minding their own business, and under her breath, she mumbles a derogatory term in Chinese for Black people. And I remember I pulled back on her hand and faced her, and I said, they are not doing anything. You don't know them. The next time you do that, I am going to go up to them, and I'm going to tell them what you said. And believe it or not, the fear of exposure by me actually made her tone it down, and she stopped doing that in public. Fortunately, my mom did not live and die that way. In later years, she came around to seeing and later openly admitting how wrong she was. In her older age, one of her best friends really was Black, and my mom admitted to her friend what her previous attitudes had been and why. And from those conversations, I was able to gain some insight as to what my mom's motivation was for her anti-Blackness. Because I think most people feel, since Asian Americans also are harmed by white supremacy, how does it make any sense for Asian Americans to be anti-Black? My mom spent most of her young life in Hong Kong when it was under British occupation, and then in the 1950s, she came to the United States when she was 16 years old. Generations before my mom, her family had been living in and doing business around Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Macau, which were French, British, and Portuguese occupied areas. So she was heavily indoctrinated into anti-Blackness in Hong Kong, where she had no exposure to Black people that would have shown her a different reality. And furthermore, what she was indoctrinated into is the idea that an Asian can elevate their status in white spaces by aligning with white supremacy, which includes aligning with anti-Blackness. So I think what my mom was doing with me is that from a young age, she saw that I was having a hard time as an Asian American assimilating. So she felt that if I associated with Black classmates, that would make assimilating into white spaces even harder. And she was concerned that associating with Black classmates would negatively impact my status in white spaces. Well, we all know with me that the outcome was I understand very clearly what spaces I want to be part of and what spaces I don't. So my mom was really proud that she was westernized. She was proud that she spoke English without an accent, that she was very well versed in European culture, and she actually looked down upon my dad for being what she called traditional and therefore backwards. Right, so where was my dad in all of this? My dad grew up in Taiwan, where he had no exposure to Black people, but he also had very little exposure to Western media. I think when he came to the United States, he was a bit uncertain around Black people because of the lack of familiarity and the slight media bias, but it only took a very little being around Black people to see that prejudice is irrational and that it serves a white supremacist agenda that he doesn't want to uphold. As I said before, in my household, it wasn't physically or emotionally safe to voice opinions that differed from my mom, so I do understand why my dad didn't speak up when my mom was being anti-Black. He had a hard enough time keeping my brother and I safe. However, what he would do is, when it was just my dad and I, he would make sure to teach me or give me resources about accurate Black history. So, for example, a lot of my mom's rhetoric surrounded musicians. So my dad would teach me about Berry Gordy, Chuck Berry, Marian Anderson, Jesse Norman. If the claim was that Black people don't value education, he would tell me about Black scholars, academics, and scientists, and so on. So that, in a nutshell, is what I was told at home behind closed doors when I was growing up.
A quick story on how this white girl grew up in a completely white town, not taught anything but white. Let's get into it. Grew up in a very small town in Iowa, and its name is Storm Lake. This small town in Iowa, as I was growing up, I only saw white people. There were not any people of color in school. Wait, yes there was. There were 2 Black guys, and they were adopted from one family. I didn't believe that there was Mexicans, but we weren't taught Mexican, so we didn't know what that was, okay? So we didn't know. It was only white, and that's all we knew. Until a big hailstorm hit that town one day, and the next thing you knew, there were Mexicans coming to town. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a Mexican, how cool. We're finally seeing a different culture. And then the Asians started to come slowly but surely, because in this town, there was a pork plant and a turkey plant. So there was big manufacturing companies for people to come to this town and work. So slowly, in my teenage years, I started seeing some Mexican, some Asian, and then I never saw Black. But ironically, me and my best friend cruising around this small town one day, we call it cruising the loop, we actually saw this big, buff, beautiful, handsome, muscular man. And I was like, oh my God, girl, look at that guy. And we're all like, oh my God, and he's so tan, blah, 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 blah. So later that exact same day, we saw this beautiful tan man at a bar and discovered that he was not tan. He was Black. But my God, was he beautiful. I actually married that first Black man that I ever saw and didn't even realize he was Black. I learned a lot from marrying and falling in love with this Black man. I loved the culture. I loved how I loved all people. I loved just the way that they lived versus white. I mean, I'm sorry, people, but Black guys, they got it going on, and they have a lot better parties, if you know what I'm saying. So the reality of this little blast from the past of mine is I got out of this little small town. I explored the world. I have learned that people are people,
And you don't have to be white to make it. You can be Black and be a happy person. You can be Asian. You can be anything. And they all are amazing cultures. So the people that are still stuck in this small town and they're little mega freaks, they haven't understood or had the opportunity to be able to see what the world really is instead of just a boring little white people town.
My content is about anti-racism and anti-oppression in the United States in particular, and because our liberation is tied together, the way that a person like me can contribute to dismantling systems of oppression is by listening to, learning from, following the lead, and amplifying the voices of the people who understand those systems the best. And unfortunately, the people who understand those systems the best are the people who have experienced the most harm, which in the United States is Native and Black Americans. The other thing is, as an Asian American, in the United States, Asian American positionality is weaponized to cause harm to Black people specifically, for example, via the model minority myth. So a lot of my content is about acknowledging and addressing anti-Blackness among Asian Americans and talking about how to fight against our weaponized positionality by not aligning with whiteness and not subscribing to white narratives, in particular about Black people. If I failed to do that and I were to focus only on anti-Asian discrimination or xenophobia, that can actually contribute to divide and conquer. That's how you wind up with Asian Americans who signed on to dismantle affirmative action. That's how you wind up with Asian Americans who fall for misinformation scapegoating Black people for the increase in anti-Asian violence. That's how you wind up with measures like the anti-Asian hate crime bill, as opposed to advocating for a hate crime bill that would benefit all marginalized people the way the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act benefits all people. But the only way that I can do that is to speak out candidly against anti-Blackness. Now, as a side note, she, her pronouns are fine with me, but I am non-binary. Generally speaking, if you are somebody that is not okay with, please block me or do whatever you need to do to not interact with me, or if you need my help, I can block you too.
This couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, our greatest allies have been the Black community. Black and Asian solidarity has a long, long history. And that's not to erase the examples from both sides of intolerance, hate, and violence. But at our best, we have long fought alongside each other, such as Frederick Douglass advocating for Chinese and Japanese immigration in 1869, or when Henry Turner and Ida B. Wells spoke out on behalf of Filipino freedom fighters. Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, and many Black protesters condemning the violence and war in Vietnam. Japanese Americans fighting alongside the Black community to repeal the Emergency Detention Act. The powerful relationship between Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X, Grace Lee Boggs and her husband James Boggs, Jesse Jackson, the NAACP for Vincent Chin, and the majority of Asian Americans who support the Black Lives Matter movement.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. But the problem is our communities are divided. For Asian Americans and for African Americans, we probably have one of the worst relationships between any community.
Well, I bet you a lot of Asian Americans too don't, in my experience, don't even realize that if it wasn't for the civil rights movement, there would not be 22 million Asian Americans in this country.
Thank you. What I have been trying to teach the Asian community is like, friends, do you understand that your success, your prosperity, your civil rights that you enjoy right now was paid for with Black blood?
My name is Erin Kimura. I'm a fifth generation Chinese and Japanese American and a fifth generation San Franciscan. I'm here today to fully support Black reparations because this is the bare ass minimum. Period. The bare ass minimum. History is enough of a reason. The dehumanization that we've seen is enough of a reason for why we need redress and reparations now. This is not an impossible reality, right? We've seen this with the Japanese Americans in the late 1980s. They received on a federal level reparations. And the fact that Black folks and our Black community and our brothers and sisters are still waiting for a formal apology, ooh-wee. I'm just going to leave that there just to simmer. And I just really want to note, especially as an Asian American woman, I would not be here if it were not for the Black liberation struggle, the Black freedom fighters, culture creators, and the world builders.
Welcome back. I must give credits to those creators, right? Those creators are mostly Black Americans and then Asian Americans, right? Who are really, really standing in solidarity, who are very happy. Some of those ones are people who, we are very emotional about the whole issue, right? It's really, really sweet to watch. Why do I feel happy about it? Over time, Black Americans have been very, very marginalized. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's happening that way. Even when they're helping people in the barest minimum, people tend not to even appreciate it. People are not seeing it. People are not giving them credits. Now, I will post every credit people give, Black Americans, because most of the time they're not going to be making it to the news, right? I'll be bringing it here to most of you because you all are family. We are now family, right? And now I'm going to try all I can to make sure I bring this news to you all so that at least you can be happy. Now that the Asian Americans have decided to stand strong and firm with Black Americans, do you think this is just for a season? Looking at the fact that they've gone through a lot, Asians too have gone through, colonizers too. They've gone through racism too. Remember what happened even during COVID, right? So, when they see all the struggles and they found out that Black Americans actually pave ways for not just Africans, right, or the Black race in America, but also for other people of color, right? Especially the Asians, the Indians, right? Mexicans, and all of that. Millions of people. I'm so happy that these people are coming out to actually say, oh, we're so grateful. We see you people. You guys are the most amazing people. In fact, in one situation or the other, these people have always been there to always, help them and all of that. So, I'm like, do you think this solidarity thing or this ally thing is going to really last for a very long time? Or do you think it's just temporary? Are they doing it because of what is happening right now in America? What do you think? Let me see that in the comments, right? Have you had any experience with Asians? Let me also see that in the comments. Asians, if you're watching me, let me know if this is genuine, right? Because you can't just come and show us fake love. We will detect it, and I will tell my people to beware and to be careful, right? So now let me see your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to share, subscribe, like. I'll be back next time. Do not forget to stay global on Global Gist with BJ. I love you all. Bye, guys.